Hello, all you subjects of the internet out there. This is the Aromantic Shipper back again with yet another video. So you all read the title, you know the point I'm going to try to argue for in this video, and it's a point that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I watch a lot of TV and movies, and while there is a plethora of great content that is both animated and live action, I firmly believe the medium of animation is thoroughly superior to the medium of live action, and in this video I'm going to explain why. Because, you see, for whatever reason, the medium of animation does not seem to garner the respect that it should, and by many people it is seen as a kid's medium, too unrealistic and fantastical to be enjoyed by adults. My dad is one such person under that opinion, and definitely holds animated programs in lower regard than live-action ones, because, quote-unquote, nothing on screen is actually happening. Oh yeah, sure, and I guess Mark Hamill actually got his hand chopped off. And Hayden Christensen actually got burned alive. It's such a bad argument to complain about cartoons not being real because all of it's fake, whether it's shot with actors and sets CGI'd in or created by putting pen to paper. It's fiction, and it's just so absolutely criminal to diss animated media because animation has an indomitable amount of advantages over the live action medium that allow for so many more possibilities and enhance a show or movie. And now I will go through all of them here in this video to defend my thesis. This is why animation is superior to live action. Part 1. Animation allows the creative decisions to control the narrative rather than behind-the-scenes drama. What I've come to notice with a lot of live-action media is that real-life events surrounding the actors often play a big part in how events in a show or movie play out. Take, for example, The Walking Dead. This is a show where a lot of events that happen are due to behind-the-scenes drama. For example, in Season 2, the character of Dale ends up being killed off, while in the comic book he lives way longer. And the reason he was killed off is because the actor who played him didn't want to be in the show anymore. For such a long-running show like The Walking Dead, actors just tend to pack up and leave when they get tired of it. And sometimes it can work, like when Andrew Lincoln left the show because he just got tired of shooting so much in the US when he lived in the UK. But Rick Grimes' exit from the show was actually a good choice for the narrative in my opinion. The same can't be said, however, for the disappearance of Maggie Rhee for nearly 2 seasons, where the show massively suffered from the lack of her presence, in my opinion, and it was because the actor Lauren Cohan wanted to move on to a new show. By the later seasons, the show really suffered from its original cast dwindling down to almost nothing and being replaced with a bunch of new cast members that the audience didn't have the same connection to. That wouldn't have been nearly as big of a problem if The Walking Dead had just been animated. On the other hand, some shows and movies opt to take the Game of Thrones route by just recasting characters when you can't get the original actors to play them. Like, remember when the actor who played Daario Naharis in Season 3 was just replaced with a different actor in Season 4? It's just really jarring seeing a character look like a different person from season to season, especially since the original actor literally looks nothing like the replacement. And neither of these guys looked like the actual Daario. What kind of fool do you take me for? He's Daario, you're Daario, I'm Daario. Are there any more Daarios I should know about? Oh, fuck you with your baseless fan theories. Then there are those tragic situations where the actor ends up dying before their role is done, so you might get a Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker situation, where somehow Palpatine returns. But also, Carrie Fisher's deleted scenes are scrambled and edited together to where she is still in the movie, but she doesn't really feel like she's an actual part of it. With animation, you don't have any of these problems. The actors don't have to physically show up on set, so doing their roles would be a lot less taxing. Voice acting can be done from anywhere, so actors could just part-time their roles while doing other things. A live-action example of this in play is like how in Power Rangers Dino Thunder there were a few episodes where Tommy Oliver was stuck in his suit because the actor who played him couldn't shoot, so he just decided to do the voice for the character remotely. With animation, you have that possibility open all the time. But even if you can't get the original actors, or they end up dying, it still isn't the end of the world, because the characters still look the same in animated form, despite the voice sounding a little different. Even in a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where the original voice actor who played Iroh died, and he had such an incredibly recognizable voice, you can still continue on with Iroh's character as normal, since even though he sounds different, we are still seeing the same character being drawn. Another advantage to animation actually has to do with a problem of morality. I mean, let's be honest here, the ethics of child acting are pretty sketchy since it's basically child labor, which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be illegal in the country, just saying. And of course there's all kinds of negative consequences that are thrust upon developing child stars. In animation, you technically don't have to use child labor, as there are adult voice actors capable of voicing kid characters, and even if child voice actors are utilized, the job is at least much less strenuous than acting on camera, and since you can't see the kids, that makes them much less vulnerable to celebritization. Thus, for stories and creative decisions based around the writing and not behind-the-scenes drama with the actors, animation takes the W. Part 2. Complete creative control. One of the biggest drawbacks of shooting live action is that you have to account for so many things in the filming process. There's so many details like the lighting, the character movements, and the backgrounds that you have to make sure are perfect before you can put out the final product. Like, let's say, for example, that you slip up and accidentally leave a Starbucks cup in the shot. In animation, though, you don't have to worry as much about all those different elements of the physical environment because you are creating the physical environment from scratch, so you can control for everything in it. You don't have to worry about refreshments left in the shot, or all the difficulties in shooting a fight scene, and how many takes you will need, and how to get certain shots. I think one of the greatest examples I can use to showcase the advantages of having control over the environment in a show or movie is lighting. You see, when done right, nighttime scenes in a show or movie can look absolutely stellar and really stick out visually compared to daytime scenes. The problem with nighttime scenes is that you constantly have to worry about still having light sources around to illuminate the action, so you can always tell what's going on. When you don't, you get the Battle of Winterfell from Game of Thrones, where you are just constantly squinting at the screen trying to see what's happening. In animation, though, you don't have this problem because you can do scenes at night and in other dark environments and control for visibility so the audience can always see what is going on perfectly. But on top of lighting, all other kinds of environmental factors limit what you are able to film other than just lighting. Let's say you have been preparing this particular scene to be shot in the rain for a while now, and you have everything prepared to do it, but then it just doesn't fucking rain, so you can't do it. Weather conditions can be a real problem in live action that happens a lot, often to the detriment of a show or movie. For instance, in the Walking Dead comics, we get to see winter snow a few times, but in the show, winter is just skipped over all the time, probably because of the difficulty of getting snow to film in the state of Georgia. It wasn't until season 9 of the show that we actually got a snowstorm, and that bothers me a lot because snow is beautiful, goddammit. But with animation, you can make a Christmas special in July if you want. There's also just so many other logistical issues involved in live-action filming not present in animation, like the fact that it can be really hard to get permission to do scenes in certain locations, like churches. Production crews can spend an immense amount of time on complicated set design for certain environments, spending potentially millions of dollars on a single location. And there's also the fact that you have to create all the costumes and props and get a bunch of extras for scenes that involve a lot of people. If you are portraying a relatively simple and down-to-earth story in your fiction, then this isn't as much of a problem, but the more ambitious your show or movie is in what it's trying to portray, the more limited it will be in live action. Sure, in movies that have a massive budget attached to them, this isn't as much of a problem, but very few franchises have the massive financial backing that, say, Star Wars and Marvel movies do. Game of Thrones is a show that suffered immensely from the limitations of the live-action medium, and watching that show was honestly the main inspiration for making this video. Granted, Game of Thrones did have a really big budget for a TV show, but even then, it was extremely restricted in what it was able to accomplish in terms of an adaptation. No spoilers, but especially as the show continued on, it kept cutting out and trimming down certain subplots and characters in the books, and while some of that can just be attributed to laziness on the part of the showrunners, there's no doubt it also would have been absolute hell to try to do everything that the books do in live action with even a large TV show budget. The cast of Game of Thrones was already utterly massive, and there was such a large variety of locations and environments needed to shoot in, but if the show had actually stayed faithful to the books, the cast would have ended up being much larger, with a lot more locations and assets, and the environments already seen in the show would have been more exotic and complex. I mean, just as a small example, look at how lame Casterly Rock looks like in the show compared to the towering fortress it is supposed to be in George R. R. Martin's work. However, in animated form, designing environments and assets completely on a computer would have been way less logistically difficult, and you can still have a massive cast with less and cheaper voice actors by just having multiple minor role voices be reprised by the same person, which is relatively common in animation. There was simply no way for the Game of Thrones story to ever feel as grand and epic as in the books, which is why it just seems odd to me why George R. R. Martin's novels were adapted into a live-action series in the first place. It would have made a lot more sense to adapt Martin's works in animated form, which would make it much easier to be able to do things that are in the A Song of Ice and Fire novels, and not be so limited by the budget, so important things like Daenerys' prophetic visions wouldn't have been cut out. Thus, for complete creative control, animation once again takes the W. Part 3. Infinite Possibilities. You see, it's not just easier to do certain things in animation compared to live action, but there are also things that it is just straight up impossible to do in live action that you can do in animation. One of the things I really love about animation is that it gives you control over character designs. In live action, you film regular, boring humans, and while of course you can switch up their outfits and hairstyles, you can't really control how a character is designed in live action. However, animation allows you to draw the character however you want, and this ends up creating unique styles that are immediately recognizable and add to the endearment of a show or movie. I mean, if you see a good character design from a certain show, you could probably immediately guess which show it's from if you're familiar with it. She's definitely from Code Geass. He's definitely from Dragon Ball. He's most certainly from Naruto. She is absolutely from Gravity Falls. And character designs can be as wacky as can be. You can have a sponge with pants be your main character, or a kid with a triangle for a head. That would never work in live action, but these shows are all the better for those wacky character designs. In terms of comedy, the realm of animation also offers a lot more opportunities than live action, with over-exaggerated movements, expressions, and slapstick that you couldn't get in live action. There's much better opportunities for creative visuals and bright colors in animation that really pop as well. And if you have ever watched anime, you know that one of the best parts about it are the awesome powers and fights. Whether it's flying around shooting planet-busting ki blasts in Dragon Ball, using all kinds of unique ninjutsu moves in Naruto, or swinging around like steampunk Spider-Man and chopping up titans in Attack on Titan, there is no doubt that anime is absolutely awesome, and it's only because it's in animated form that this kind of stuff works so well. Almost always, when you try to translate Battle Shonen into live action, it results in an unmitigated disaster, in no small part because you just can't replicate certain things able to be achieved in animated form as well in live action. Avatar The Last Airbender, a Nickelodeon animated series, takes a lot of inspiration from anime and is similarly awesome in how it uses its powers and fights. The sequences in ATLA are absolutely gorgeous, and the show takes full advantage of the fact that it is in an animated medium in its fight scenes. Even the less important fights of the show would be near impossible to achieve in a live-action medium. Now contrast this to the live-action movie, and I don't know the exact budget of the Avatar series, but from some research, I'm pretty sure the Avatar The Last Airbender movie costed more than the entire series to make, and it was so fucking lame. Almost none of the magic, wonder, and epicness presented in animated form in the show translated into live action, and no scene in this movie wowed me more than I could be wowed by just an average episode of the cartoon. That's why I never gave a shit about the Avatar The Last Airbender live-action series that was announced to be coming out on Netflix, far before the leaks about some of the very questionable creative choices. Live-action Avatar just does not interest me. I don't want to watch it. The medium of animation is so integral to the identity of this franchise and what it was able to accomplish, that regardless of the writing quality of any of these money-milking rehashes, it will never be Avatar to me, and I will only ever get excited for animated Avatar projects in the future. Star Wars is a franchise that I think gives a really good example of how the medium of animation can actually improve a property originally brought to life in live action. I still have to get caught up with everything Star Wars related, so I haven't watched Season 2 of The Mandalorian or The Book of Boba Fett yet, but just focusing on Season 1 of The Mandalorian, it had a pretty limited scope in terms of environments and situations that are presented. And it's clear why. The Mandalorian has a pretty solid budget, but a TV budget all the same. However, compare the live-action Mandalorian Season 1 to just the first season of the animated Clone Wars TV show, which had a budget of fucking toilet paper and came out over 10 years ago, and yet was much wider in scope and opened up the world of Star Wars much more with so many different locations and situations. The Clone Wars TV show adds so much to the Star Wars universe and accomplishes things simply not possible in live action with a comparable budget. Through the magic of animation, though, the Star Wars universe had new life breathed into itself with this cartoon. Of course, the Star Wars prequels, which were big-budget movies, had a lot more room to achieve very impressive set pieces and varied environments. But less so with the original Star Wars movies, and do you know why that is? Well, it's because of animation, CGI special effects specifically. Now, a lot of people complain about the overuse of CGI in the prequel trilogy, but personally, I love it because it made the world of Star Wars feel so much grander and more open. The original trilogy was limited by the technology of the time, and since it couldn't use animation, the audience often saw the world of the story through smaller and cramped set pieces, rather than the gorgeous, wide-sweeping layouts of the environments in the prequels. From a technical standpoint, the prequel movies are a lot more impressive than the original trilogy in what they were able to accomplish, and that's due to animation. It's honestly kind of ridiculous to me that some people don't think animation is worth as much respect as live action, when animation is a huge part of why blockbuster movies coming out today can be so awesome. Of course, there's always the issue of CGI not quite blending perfectly with real-life images, no matter how detailed and convincing it is, but if everything is simply animated, it matches a lot better, obviously. Overall, for the limitless possibilities that it opens up, animation takes the W. Alright then, I hope by now I have been able to make a sufficiently compelling case for why I believe the medium of animation is superior to that of live action. For much less demand from the actors, complete creative control, and limitless possibilities, the medium of animation simply has more going for it than live action does, and that is why I will always prefer to watch an animated program. That's not to say I don't appreciate live action works. I do. There are tons of shows and movies that I absolutely adore that are live action, but nothing in real life can ever quite capture the awe and amazement I feel when watching animated shows, as different from each other as Gravity Falls, or Avatar: The Last Airbender, or Adventure Time, or Attack on Titan, or the beautiful Pixar movie that is Up, or the classic DreamWorks Kung Fu Panda movies, or the zany, unironic masterpiece that is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I really like this film, you guys. I might do a review of it one day to give it more attention. Now, to be perfectly fair and balanced here, we should also acknowledge the drawbacks of animation as well. I stated before how one of the biggest advantages of the medium is that animators control every aspect of what is being shown on screen. But this can also be a problem because, well, the animators control every aspect of what is being shown on screen. Every detail, every character design, facial movement, fight scene, background, color palette, it all has to be drawn or generated depending on whether you're talking about 2D or 3D animation. Animation definitely has simpler logistics than live-action shooting since it is done almost entirely with computers, but I am not at all trying to give off the impression that animation is easy. It's not, and still takes a ton of effort. And for 2D animated productions that don't have a super high budget, what animators will often do is cut corners in certain areas to be able to get the production out and still give primary importance to the most impactful scenes. It's called Sakuga, and this happens a lot in the anime industry where the fight scenes will look absolutely gorgeous, but then the scenes where characters will just be talking to each other will look very flat and uninspiring, with simple and repetitive lip flap animation.
I eat ass.
In the medium of live action, characters have flowing, detailed, moving character expressions because, well, that's how humans naturally talk and act, not standing still and moving their lips up and down. CGI animations run into a bit of a different problem. Since you're working with a 3D model you can manipulate, and not just pictures, it is definitely easier to generate movement. But 3D models also run into Uncanny Valley more easily, where the designs can just feel very janky and cheap, as opposed to 2D animation where the same designs would work fine, and look a lot more natural. The Clone Wars television show may have done a lot for the Star Wars franchise, but I don't think many people will disagree that, especially in the earlier seasons, the character models just felt off and didn't really move too naturally, which was a symptom of the show's smaller budget. Also, while I talked a bit before about how the animation industry is not nearly as exploitative to actors as the live-action Hollywood industry is, that's not to say the animation industry isn't exploitative. I mean, anyone who is an anime fan has probably heard the horror stories about how badly treated animators are in Japan, with them being paid pity wages for dedicating so much of their lives to their craft. It's not just in Japan, though, and animators in all different places go unrecognized and underpaid. As with any kind of exploitation, this should rightly be called out, and steps need to be taken to protect the rights of the working class. Another drawback of animation is that despite it opening up so many incredible possibilities, if something is high quality and the animators are paid well, it can get really expensive. The movie Tangled, for instance, costed $260 million to produce. For reference, that isn't too far off from Avengers Endgame, which costed about $356 million. And unfortunately, perhaps the biggest problem with animation is exactly what I'm trying to fight against with this video. People simply don't respect or watch animated media as much as live action. Now, yes, it's true that animation has gained more respect over the years, with Western animations of both kids and adult media breaking new ground, and Eastern animation becoming a much more widely accepted and celebrated medium. The younger generation at least has a healthy amount of respect for the quality of animation. But there are still a lot of people, like my dad, who look down on animation. I mentioned before how I think Game of Thrones definitely should have been an animated show, as you could have accomplished more with it for a lower budget. But the problem with that is, if Game of Thrones had been animated, I guarantee not as many people would have watched it. My dad outright said to me he wouldn't have checked it out if it was animated. There is still this lingering idea that animation is only for kids while live action is for adults, and that's bullshit. I would know. I dedicated major segments of my childhood to watching a bunch of dollar store Nickelodeon and Disney live-action kids sitcoms, none of which I ever find myself wanting to return to. With a few exceptions. But after growing up, I think I appreciate animation more as an adult than I do when I was a kid. I still look back to the incredible animated shows of my childhood with great admiration and how genuinely great so many of them are. The argument that, oh, well, I can't connect to a series because it's just a bunch of drawings or computer-generated images, it's not real people, it doesn't make any sense. Should you give up on reading books too because that's just letters on a page and not real people? Would Eren Yeager or Prince Zuko's character development have been improved in any way if they had been portrayed by real-life actors instead of being animated? Would the impact of the Red Wedding have been any less if it had been drawn rather than filmed? No, of course not. Animation does not detract from a story or movie or show in any way. In fact, animation often enhances it. A good example is BoJack Horseman. This is a show that definitely could have been produced in live action, as it focuses on a down-to-earth story about mental illness and the dark side of Hollywood. However, the fact that it is animated only improves the show. The fact that half the cast are randomly anthropomorphized animals leads to a lot of great comedy and just makes the show feel very unique and stylized. But on top of that, the animation also greatly enhances the story and writing, with the fever dreams and hallucinogenic sequences being widely considered to be the best parts of the show. That tell the story using visuals, and it would be near impossible to achieve this kind of thing in live action. Animation has never been just for kids and never will be. As computer technology evolves further and further, the animated medium will continue to evolve with it, reaching greater heights, and people with an appreciation for the animated medium need to support it, and say no to the slog of live-action remakes of classic animated properties that would rip away from them what made them special in the first place. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed my thesis on why I believe animation is superior to live action. I know I sounded a bit scatterbrained in this video, like I was sort of going all over the place, but I just feel really passionate about this topic, and I wanted to cover all my bases. So anyway, do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. This has been the Aromantic Shipper, and as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye.